This then is the guidance film for the IaCT activity that Year 9 students will be undertaking once they have received their exam papers back. The point of this activity is to get students to reflect not just on the revision process, but on what they did in the exam and the technique that they applied. In doing so, they will identify where they have gained marks, where they have dropped marks, and consequently what work needs to be improved upon in order to boost their chances of achieving a higher grade. All the questions on this particular assessment were ones that students have been prepared for prior to the exam, as well as being key GCSE skills that have been taught in class since Year 7. Question 1, the inference question. Using source A, give two things that you can infer about why Henry Ford was so successful in America in the 1920s. Complete the question below. This style of question appears on both paper 1 and paper 3 of the GCSE exam. It's higher order thinking from the initial outset, and there will be 5 minutes allocated to this task. Therefore, students have effectively 2 minutes per inference, along with a minute to interpret the source. If you look at the source, you can see that the specific instruction is given. The inference, the educated guess, or the assumption, has to be focused on why Henry Ford was so successful. Other inferences could be made, but unless they are relevant to why Henry Ford was successful, they will not score. The format is given to the students in a writing frame on their exam paper, and you can see that the initial element tells you, requests from you what you can infer, and secondly, it needs to be backed up with details from the source. That needs to be done twice in 5 minutes. Please note, because the source is both a picture and text, the students could in theory describe the picture as the evidence for their inference, or quote from the picture and the text in order to provide the inference. What students can't do, however, when they make their inference, is they can't put in the inference section, for example, a word from the advert that they're looking at. That's not an inference, that would be comprehension. So this is a challenging question. The two examples that are provided, what I can infer was that Ford was successful because the Ford Model T was very popular in the 1920s and lots of people were buying it. So that gets around the point that it says the 10 millionth Ford was produced. That is provided in the details. You can't put the text from the advert in the initial inference. So it requires students to think about expressing themselves and how they communicate it clearly. Secondly, what I can infer was that Ford was successful as his card was affordable to the average American, which meant more people were able to buy it, and then of course the details in the source here are that it was $295 and never rose. So, inference, details that back it up. Inference and details that back it up. Question 2, the usefulness question. This now is referring to the nature, origin and purpose skill that students have been taught since Year 7. In this particular task, students are asked, and this question appears on paper 3 of the exam, study sources A and B. How useful are these sources for an inquiry into the impact of Prohibition and it had on America in the 1920s? Use these sources and your own knowledge to answer the question. So again, the task is very clear, but on reading of the question, you will see that there are several tasks built into this that students need to approach with care and caution to make sure that they provide all the elements required. They are going to have to look at sources both A and B. I only need to know how useful the source is. So at some point you are going to have to provide a conclusion that says source A is blank useful because, and then repeat it for source B. I need to know how useful the sources are for an inquiry into the impact Prohibition had on America. So it has to be a very focused answer. Why the source is useful for anything other than Prohibition and its impact on America will not be relevant. Use these sources and your own knowledge to answer the question. Without your own knowledge included, you'll find that there's a limiting judgment on the mark scheme. This is a classic question demonstrating in history that you have to have a very controlled and calm response to a question, being very clear what you're writing, when you're writing, and planning ahead to make sure you include all the elements. What students have been asked to do here is read the model response that's been provided and identify where the nature, origin and purpose of each source is identified. Secondly, where the source comments about the content of the source, including quotes. And thirdly, where own knowledge about the topic is provided to test the accuracy of the source. All three elements are required. Students can then colour code the activity to identify in the model response where those elements are being provided. This can then be applied to their own second attempt at answering the question. In the exam, this 8-mark question will have an allocation of 15 minutes. And source B, as you can see, is listed on that second page. Question 3 is the 12-mark 3 PEA paragraph essay that students are expected to write. They have again been practicing this particular skill since Year 7, and 12-mark essay in this case will have a 15-minute time weight allocated to it. The question: explain how life was so difficult for Black Americans in America during the interwar years. You may use the following in your answer: the KKK, the Jim Crow laws. You must include information of your own. Please be aware this is a limiting judgment. When you look at the mark scheme, you will see it's clearly indicated that failure to include your own knowledge will limit the amount of marks that you can achieve overall, irrespective of how well these two particular paragraphs have been written. Students may use the 2 prompts that have been provided, but they are not obligated to do so. What they must do, however, is include information of their own. For the most able students, point evidence analysis, and an analysis should also be backed up with a subordinate clause as well. This will add more detail and volume to their analysis and also possibly help link paragraphs together. A subordinate clause might be started with the words additionally, comma, consequently, comma, and explain how your analysis can be extended. What students need to do here is colour code the model answer on the page here, identifying the P, the E, the A, and possibly the subordinate clause in each of the paragraphs. When that has been done, students can then revisit their own exam response and again improve it and identify in their first example where and when they are doing the 3 different elements of paragraph construction. When this is all completed, the students will then be able to identify what it is that they need to redo and then reflect upon their preparation for the exam. Was it that their focus was knowledge-based, or was their focus skills-based? If they lent too much time to one and not the other, has that let them down? Or more worryingly, did they in fact apply a lot of time, have a balanced approach to both skills and knowledge, and still for reasons they are not clear about, fail to achieve? In which case they need to go back and seek guidance from their teacher. The whole purpose of this activity is to have students consider their preparation, how they applied their knowledge and skills in the exam, and to help them think about the route that they're going to take in their options, which will be coming up shortly.